Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, well, I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the bits and bobs, really, that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. Now, what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast. I really love doing these. This is where I get someone from the filmmaking world in, get to spend half an hour chuntering to them about their film work and their background and their own film stories. And I'm really, really thrilled for this episode to be joined by a film composer whose work I just love, Patrick Doyle. Now, Patrick Doyle has done film scores as broad and wide as Sense and Sensibility, Carlito's Way, Henry V. He's worked extensively with Kenneth Branagh, and in fact, it was his latest collaboration with Kenneth Branagh on the film Death on the Nile that we were here to talk about, although, as you were about to find out, the conversation went off all over the place, really, as we discussed the breadth of his film work. A couple of notes just heading into the interview. I quote at one point a separate interview that had been done with Doyle, and I use a quote from that. And just to give you the source of that was from the website popdisciple.com, where there is an excellent interview with Patrick Doyle that was run on March 22nd, 2019. I do hugely recommend checking that out. Now, we're going to talk about a mix of films. One that we focus on just in terms of it's his first collaboration is with Kenneth Branagh, and it's his first film score, as you're about to hear, is Henry V, which was Branagh's first movie. It was Doyle's first movie. And so they just talk there about working. He talks there with working with Simon Rattle, who's the conductor of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, who recorded that score with him. We're going to go through Carlito's Way, directed by Brian De Palma. We come to Death on the Nile, which marks his second, Kenneth Branagh's second Poirot movie, and Patrick Doyle returns for that as well. But I think that's pretty much all you need to know going into this one. That I think the man speaks for himself, really. I just wanted to give you those couple of notes beforehand, just in case you just got a little bit lost at what I was waffling on about. Without further ado, what I'm going to do is play you a clip from Death on the Nile that's got a little bit of Patrick Doyle's music in the background of it, and then we'll go straight into the conversation with him. So I'll shut up now, and here's that clip.
Come on, Lenny, let's dance.
Ah, the bereaved. There's one at every wedding party. The good Dr. Windlesham proposed to Miss Ridgway when she was still Miss Ridgway. He and the papers both had the deal as good as done. Then came the engorged stallion, and now it's Mrs. Doyle. If I were in his shoes, I'd only come here to put a bullet in the groom. Our other guests, Lynette's godmother, who despises Lynette's wealth, and the godmother's nursemaid Bowers, who covets it, as does Lynette's own maid, poor old Louise. Oh, his cousin Andrew. He's a slippery fish. No one except Lynette trusts him. We find Mother and I are the only sane people here. The only one who seems to like Lynette at all is her old schoolmate Rosalie. She's Salome Otterbourne's niece and arranged for her to come to play for them.
So that was just some of the music from Death of the Nile, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the man who composed it. It's Patrick Doyle. Hello, Patrick Doyle. How are you?
I'm very well, Simon. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you very much, and I'm in nowhere near as posh surroundings as you, from what I can work out. I have no idea how you do what you do. I mean, I should be upfront about this. I consider what you do to be alchemy, really. And I had I was lucky enough to have an interview with Kenneth Branagh a few years ago, where we spent a good chunk of time talking about you, because it's quite an unusual collaboration from what I can see between composer and filmmaker. And he described the key to the pair of you working together, and this I found unusual as well from my side of the fence, is starting early and getting into the guts of a project really, really early. Can you tell me that from your side? Because I find that really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, it makes sense, because very often films are made and But, I mean, of not more. I think I'm not saying more often than not, but often films are made, and the composer is very much a last minute decision. And in my case, with working with Ken, we work from the very outset when we first met. We collaborated in theatre,
Yes.
and so once he had an idea for something, I was in there right at the very beginning, contributing to, based on his vision, and nothing's changed. It's the same. But the transition from theatre to film was seamless in terms of how we work together. So very early on, I am sent the script. He discusses in detail what he sees in terms of the story and the characters, and his descriptions and his concept is so clear in his explanation and his enthusiasm that it gives you a real sense of the picture without even having seen a shot of the film, even before the film has begun. So this is a great way for me to fire my imagination.
So I read his memoir a couple of years ago, the one that he wrote in his late 20s beginnings, and he talked of the process of making Henry V, and it came across like, with all due respect, people who had no idea how to make a film, making a film.
Yeah.
And as such, there was an awful lot of learning a process that perhaps if it had been taught the other way around, wouldn't have been the process. Can you relate to that as well? Was that your experience of it?
Well, it was a baptism of fire, I suppose. First time director, first time producer, first time conductor, Simon Rattle, and my first time as a film composer. And it's such an iconic story, and such an incredible, world famous, justly so, genius of William Shakespeare. Having had worked in theatre with Shakespeare, I was a little less daunted, just a little less daunted, tackling this great story. But yes, it was very frightening, because it was my first school, obviously, and all I had was to follow my instinct, and all we had was to follow our instinct. And I suppose the more you know, probably the less bold you would be, because as the older you get, you see the pitfalls, the potential pitfalls, and it probably pulls you back a little bit in terms of reticence. But so I just went for it, and as did he. So you just as I say, you shoot from the hip, you follow your instinct. No one had. I hadn't gone to film school, or I'd come up through the ranks of theatre for 10 years.
Yeah.
So up close and personal as an actor and working with actors. So that was it's been a tremendous boon to my work throughout my career, and people have employed me, apart from Ken, because of my experience as an actor and working with actors. Immersing myself into the story. But yes, it was a question of following your instincts, and no one taught me. There was then film music in terms of its popularity was really a niche thing. Now everyone wants to be a film composer. There are postgraduate film courses now. They didn't exist then. So really, I was self-taught in every direction. But fortunately, throughout my life, I've always been acutely aware of music and drama, whether I'm watching TV or I was watching television or a film.
Yeah.
So I have, a very good sense of rhythm when I watch a film, because that's a key thing when you're a composer. What kind of pulse should be that sits comfortably with the speed and the cut of the edit. So I have never had a problem with that. I spoke to people in those early days who said you have a natural sort of touch for that kind of aspect of it. A lot of composers, I was told, find it difficult to find the pulse, but that's something that's come quite natural. I mean, I can't speak for a composer; I can only speak for myself. But all of these skills, in terms of scoring it and everything else, it was all terrifyingly new. Of course, working with Simon Rattle for the first time was an extraordinary experience. But what a wonderful person he is.
Because it was City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. My
Was.
hometown did that one, didn't
Yes.
they?
And Birmingham has been a very, very lucky city for myself.
It's right behind me there. That's
Well, it's been a very, very lucky city for myself and our family. My son Patrick, he went to Birmingham University, and he's already started composing for film and doing very well. He's just had a brand new baby, actually, the first grandchild.
Congratulations!
Thank you. I was there as an actor at Birmingham Rep. We did Candide, and Jets with everything, and then of course Renaissance, the theatre company, launched itself for its UK tour from Birmingham, and it was there and of course Simon Rattle was conducting next door. My dream was, oh my goodness, it would be amazing if he conducted this score. And it so happened the photographer on the film was a neighbour of Simon Rattle, and she gave him a demo tape which I'd written, and he said he'd love to do the picture. So that was, again,
that's amazing.
He was in Birmingham at the time, all this Birmingham connection. So I've got great fond memories of Edgbaston and staying up there. And
that's the posh bit, yeah.
No, I was in Diggs there, and I stayed with a friend's mother and father. And he was an expert on potatoes.
Okay.
He went all over the world to study the potato. They were a lovely family, so it was a wonderful experience all around.
I've never had a film junket interview go on to potatoes before. This is new to me. This is wonderful.
We used to sit and we read the Guardian together, and we were discussing.
Yeah, we're groundbreaking.
And I said, "Which husband always off to Bolivia, to study potatoes down there, But very, very, they were a smart couple, very intelligent couple. He was a professor of botany and everything else, so it was fascinating.
The bit, I mean, this is a sycophantic question. There's no way around it, so I'm just going to commit to it. The bit where I realised you were a genius was Carlito's Way and Much Ado About Nothing, following in quick succession, because throughout your filmography, I think that there's a tendency that people like pigeonhole you as the classics and quite theatrical. But two more contrasting films and two more contrasting scores, I think, are really hard to find, and I adore both of those scores. Can you take me into that period, just in like the early 90s, where on the one hand you're working with Brian De Palma, who I think it's fairly well known, his directorial style contrasts quite a lot with Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah, it's a mafia story, and a gangster story, and Brian De Palma had seen a film I did called Indochine, directed by Régis Varnier. He is a very good friend of Régis Varnier, and after that he heard the score. He called me up himself to speak to me and asked me if I would do this. And of course I said, I think I will do this.
Yeah.
I said yes immediately. Of course, he's an iconic director. I mean, unbelievable. So this was an incredible assignment, and I suppose I just delved into all my perceptions and years of watching The Godfather and a myriad of gangster movies from James Cagney, White Heat, or you name it. I was brought up in a world where you only had 2 or 3 stations. You had ITV1 and BBC, and of course you saw every film that was for the previous 30 years. So I watched so many of these American gangster pictures, and so I felt as if once removed, I had a passion and a feeling for it, and it was wonderful to have this opportunity to write a jazz-driven score. Really, it's quite a jazzy score.
Yeah.
And also a great opportunity to write passionate. It was a passionate love story mixed with this mafia background and a story of dilemma, where the leading character had to make a choice between the old way and the new way, and finding love and going off and with the bride of his dreams. So there was romance in it, there was excitement in it, there was tension in it, and there was this jazz feeling, and a wonderful drive. And the action sequence at the end, like a locomotive, the underground. And this, although it was at the end, it sort of was hinted at throughout the score earlier on. Ultimately, planting kind of subconscious sort of connections to the chase sequence at the end. I'll tell you a very interesting story about that chase sequence. The famous Grand Central sequence that he shot. I happened to be in New York to watch the scene where Pacino comes in and he holds the dustbin lid over his head and he's looking up to his girlfriend Gail, who's dancing in a loft in New York. And the following day, I went to see that particular sequence, and I watched the 10-minute sequence. And after this was presented to him by the editor. He had never seen it before, cut together, and obviously now had I. And he turned around to the editor and he said, "Bill, it was Bill Pankow was the guy's name. He said, Bill, go back to," and he went back a couple of thousand feet or whatever it was, and said, "This scene here, I went da ba da ba ba, da ba 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 ba," in terms of the cut, and that was his only note in that 10-minute sequence, and that taught me immediately this guy was extremely rhythmical and musical. Yeah, and it turns out that his knowledge of classical music and the repertoire was quite formidable, because he would talk about Tristan and Isolde from Wagner's opera. He would talk about the Melly song. And at one point, I wrote a piece of music and he said, "Patrick, you're driving my scene. You're telegraphing my story." And he also taught me, I'm embarrassed to say, to look closer to a picture. Yeah. Just look at, you think 80% of it, go the extra 20% and study every corner of it. And I thought I was doing that. But so I learned a lot from him. And what was interesting was he said, he said, there's a score, I'll see you in 4 weeks. I said, "No, we have to have a meeting." He goes, "No, I'll see you in 4 weeks." I said, No, I'm not ready. I'm not writing a score and then arriving at the sessions without you having heard nothing. Okay, and that's the reason why I was in New York. I asked to go along to New York and play material to him. He goes, "Okay, if you like," and he loved it. And that was it. But I still needed that reassurance before I landed that recording session with this great man. So I don't know if that helps to sort of clarify the work in that.
That's really interesting. And then on something like I'm coming to Death on the Nile in a second, which I saw yesterday. But on something like Much Ado, are you as present on set there? Because for want of a better way of putting it, that's a very outdoor sounding score, and that's from.
Well, I'm in it as an actor. I play Balthazar, so I'm in the film. So I was there for 6 weeks. So, and I was very much. And Ken at one point said, "I need a song for Nero's funeral tomorrow." I wrote it that night and taught the actors, and the next day we were on the set and recorded it in the tennis court. So we were all working very hard, and I was obviously I was there during all the the choreography at the end, the dance sequence. So certainly I evolved with the film. Yeah.
And so, you've got this such a broad range of work that you've done with Kenneth Branagh, and you come to Death on the Nile. And I listened before I went into the Murder on the Orient Express score beforehand, because I was curious how much you were going to lean on that going into this. And I wonder if you can tell me about your process there, because the closest you've come to almost a follow-up was going in on a Harry Potter film. Yeah. Where the interesting choice I thought you made there was you left quite a lot of the temptation may have been to use what had been used before, but you absolutely didn't on the Potter film. So what was your thinking going into Death on the Nile? What was that early meeting? What were the conversations there?
Well, really, Murder in the Orient Express never came up. It was about conversation about Death on the Nile. Is a brand new deal. It's a brand new location, a brand new story. It's a different part of the world, clearly. It never even struck me, and this is the truth. It never struck me that this was a sequel ever. I only worked on the job in hand in this brand new story. But for me, the only connection was obviously Poirot and Agatha Christie, and obviously there was the same designer and Michael Green, the writer. Jim plays great design, and Michael Green. And Harris Zambalukas, obviously, and a new costume designer, Paco Delgado, did a wonderful job. So, but a lot of the core artisans were were brought back. And I suppose that was the only connection. But it never there was never anything discussed about Murder on the Orient Express. It was just it was another feature.
Yeah. So you went to it completely with a blank piece of paper.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was no sense during that story because it's so disconnected to the other one. There was no sense of joining them in any way.
Yeah. There's no temptation to write like a little melody for a moustache or something like that. Make life easier.
No. It didn't. If something calls out for it, if there was a reference, if he referenced that other picture in the narrative, in the story, then suddenly you have a key to get in there. But I wasn't looking for this key, and it was never referred to. So you just move on through this story.
So if I can put a quote that you gave in an interview back to you, and just ask how this the process was for Death on the Nile. You said in a really excellent interview, and I'll credit it in the notes on this podcast, that in advance of doing a film, I always create a template of various sounds, and you talk about assembling a conceptual suite inspired by the music. So what was that here? What was the template? What were the sound? What the mood board, if you like?
Well, on this, all I did was prepare potential sounds of location, and which I ended up using. I mean, obviously, I thought, well, the duduk be used, which is a Armenian blowing instrument, a reeded instrument, which is used very commonly to depict the Middle East and Eastern music. And also, I used, I forget the pronunciation, this Yaili tambur, which is it looks like a long banjo, except that the bottom of it is bulbous and looks like a not quite like a sitar, but it's like a melon with the head chopped off. So that gives you the resonating chamber, and also a doumbek, which is a Egyptian drum. These are three different instruments, especially the tambur. It created some lovely. I knew that some of that would come in handy, but it was really in terms of I didn't write a script for this one. I didn't feel it was right. With Murder on the Orient Express, I wrote a suite. In fact, I didn't expect to use it. Then retrospectively, I come back to certain elements of it. It depends. It depends on. It depends. Each individual picture throws up a different way of working. Nothing's ever the same. It's constantly changing. So it was really it was instruments of the period that I'd done preparatory work for.
I mean, from the outside looking in and listening to the answers that you're giving, you strike me as someone who's more after collaborations than you are jobs. That seems to be kind of the impression I'm getting off you. I'm just curious, really. If I was an independent filmmaker, and I'm not, so I'm not using this and I just thought I really want Patrick Doyle to write a score for my film. What would it take to interest you in my project?
Well, I'm very often asked to do pictures, and obviously it's very important that the people you work with are people you feel you can be comfortable and can build up a working relationship. And obviously the script has to be a good script. It has to be well written, because if it's not in the script, it certainly will not be on the screen. And I have been shown some pictures in the past that I thought, well, I think you probably need maybe a slightly less experienced composer, or I diplomatically didn't feel the film was strong enough that I probably felt my work would probably would be more detailed than I would like to be, or it would be more difficult to try and do my best. And maybe budget reasons. I feel that maybe, for example, that maybe the score I felt should be a bigger orchestra, and there's no budget for that. So I really then it's a very tricky situation. There's an expectation which you can't deliver without the relative budget. So it varies from job to job, but ultimately my aim is always to work with, as you said, and to build up collaborations or a good collaborative experience and have fun. Because if it's not fun, it's too much like hard work.
I love that ethos. If I can, before I'm chopped off, if I can just ask you this: you said right near the start of the interview that you were doing film scores when they weren't as in vogue, perhaps, as they are now.
Yeah.
I think you pioneered the concert, the film score concert.
Yeah.
And they're everywhere at the moment. I seem to remember you were right there near the start. One thing that strikes me is the recognition of a film score is often linked to how successful the film is.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, you look back, I mean, I discovered James Horner's score to Krull, for instance, which is a stunning piece of work, but because the film didn't quite spike in the way expected, it just has taken a long time to find its audience. Are there scores that you're particularly proud of across your back catalogue of work that you felt haven't found the audience because perhaps the film didn't make $76 zillion at the box office, but you think the work, is particularly one we should seek out?
No, well, I've been very lucky. I think that I've been extremely fortunate. I think the majority of scores that I've composed, the films have been very high quality and they've all done well.
I'd agree with that.
But I'm very, very fortunate. But I also have been, I have said yes and no to projects based on my gut. And I was asked to do a film one time, and I felt it wasn't by a good director, a really good director. I felt it wasn't right at that time. And then 2 weeks later, I got a call from Robert Altman to do his picture. So,
right.
And that was Gosford Park, and
yes, of course.
And it was an extraordinary experience, and became very good friends, especially with his wife Catherine. So these are decisions that are both personal and artistic, and you have to have them both. I think I've been very fortunate to answer your question in that I've done over 60 movies now. I think 16 movies now, and very, very fortunate to work with great directors, and many of these pictures with Kenneth, and they've all been high quality writing, quality design, great directing, and most of them with a very good shelf life. So I'm very, very fortunate in that these films. I mean, if I think back to Thor, Planet of the Apes, and Cinderella, Way, and Sense of Sensibility, Calendar Girls, they've all been so different and so eclectic, and I've been very, very fortunate that I've never been typecast as a composer. I don't know, that wasn't my design. It's just, and I've been very fortunate. Great scripts have been sent to me, and people have called and asked me to work on great projects. I can't think of a film that I felt, well, that deserved more than that. I think they've all managed to achieve a good audience and a good return for the filmmakers.
Patrick Doyle, I'm out of time, but I can't tell you what a thrill this has been. And I look forward to lots more of your scores and wearing out even more CDs of your music. Congratulations on Death of the Nile. Congratulations on your grandchild, and be safe and well. Thank you.
And you, Simon. All the very best.
And that was the brilliant Patrick Doyle. I really enjoyed chatting to him. And just one thing, two little points of order on that. I'm very, very aware that I introduced the name of the film at the start as Death of the Nile rather than Death on the Nile. I can assure you that the Nile is alive and well. I've just accidentally managed to knock it off. Also, the film itself, Death on the Nile, crikey, I nearly did it again, is released in UK cinemas on the 11th of February, the day this podcast is going out into the world, and that's available on the big screen. It's taken quite a while to get here, but it's here. I quite enjoyed it as well. Which brings to the end this special episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening and taking the time to download and press play. If you're not completely bored of my waffle, you can find more from me on Twitter @SimonBrew. You can find more of the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories Pod. The website filmstories.co.uk is updated every weekday with movie news, reviews, features, all sorts of bits and bobs there. The shop, store.filmstories.co.uk, is where you can buy our magazines and our Blu-ray. And if you really like this podcast and want to support the Film Stories project, we're also at Patreon, patreon.com/Simon Brew. All the contributions from that are invested back into Film Stories, paying new writers, giving people a break, and buying materials for this podcast. You get podcasts released early. You find out what we're up to early as well. And thank you to everyone who supports me there. The most important thing, as always, is that you all stay safe and well, that I hope the world is treating you okay. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. Until then, you all look after yourselves. The very best to you. Bye-bye.